meeting to order at 4:03. As this meeting is being recorded by the chair, and if anyone else is recording, ask them to notify the chair at this time. I'm not saying we're either. And I'm not seeing, is there someone from the public who's joining now, or? Can't tell. Okay, so move on to introduction of committee members. I'll start. I'm George Tolompsis. I'm the planning board representative to this committee and the vice chair of the committee. And also at the chair's behest, I facilitate these meetings. And go on to you, Mary.
Hi, I'm Mary Chickman. I'm chair of the Sustainable Greenfield Implementation Committee. And I will hand it on to Jonah.
Hi, I'm Jonah Keene. I am a public member. I'll pass it to Amy.
Hi all, Amy K. Lane. I'm Director of Community and Economic Development for the city and the Planning Board or Planning Department designee. I will pass it on to Nancy.
Hello, I'm Nancy Hazard, a member at large, and there's some background noise. I don't know who's not muted. I'm sorry, just to say, I'm passing it on to Françoise.
Hi, I'm Marie-Françoise Hatt, and I'm a public member. Passing it on to Mike.
Hello, Mike Boudreau, Director of Facilities for Greenfield Public Schools. And I don't know if there's anybody else.
I'll chime in. I'm EJ Baker. I'm a public member.
You're muted, George.
Muted, George.
You're a member of the public, EJ?
Yes.
You're very welcome. I was just the confusion because when we say a public member, we're talking about members of the committee.
Oh, gotcha. Sorry, I'm just a member of the public. Just a person.
No, not just. I just wanted just for clarification, because some members on this committee are designated either representing town council or planning board, etc., or other departments, as folks said, and some are appointees of the mayor, so they're public members. So just to be clear.
Thank you for the clarification.
You're welcome. And I see Hannah has joined us. We're just at the end of introductions, Hannah. Hannah, can you hear? Yeah, you were just at the end of introductions, so you're next.
Sorry, I'm having major technical difficulties. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. I'm Hannah, member at large.
I think go on to the next agenda item, which is approval of the October 2024 meeting minutes. With the note that we had no meeting in November, so there were no minutes.
George, Mike, I think it's Mike where the white noise is coming. I don't know if Mike could mute. There's like the little background noise that's making it kind of hard. Oh, perfect. Thanks.
Yeah, it's helpful to hear that because sometimes you don't realize that I've been guilty of that myself. So is there a motion to approve the October minutes?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Hearing, seeing none. All board members in favor of approving the minutes?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, Mike. And that's everybody but me, and I shall abstain because I wasn't there. Thank you. All right, the next item is a big one. 2024 master plan update, next steps. We didn't have people listed as who was leading these items. Mary, I'm assuming you were going to start us off?
Sure.
Great, thanks.
And can you say what the first item is since I'm not looking at the agenda? Thanks.
Sure, yeah, I can just run through the steps. It says vote to forward the draft recommendation to the planning board for their adoption/approval process. Process for any changes to the master plan in the future. Review the draft story map and discuss process for finishing putting it together. Also discuss ongoing maintenance of the story map if needed and where the story map will reside in the city's website. And lastly, sharing with the public, determine next steps for publicizing once planning board has adopted. Possible public meeting and other. So that's the scope of this item, for which we have 20 minutes. So first is the vote to send the draft recommendations forward.
Yeah, so I'll take this one. As we all probably remember, we've been working on the recommendations that the Conway School developed for us during the first part of the year. And my hope is that we will vote to move these forward to the planning board for their adoption and or approval, whatever that process is. And I would like to make a motion to move forward with, or I would like to make a motion to approve the recommendations to send to the planning board. And I do have a discussion item after this.
Thank you. Is there a second to that motion?
I second.
Thank you. So is there discussion of that motion?
Sorry, who
Yeah.
seconded for the minutes? I'm so sorry.
Francois.
Francois, great.
Yeah, so I just wanted to mention that Nancy had sent me a very long email of changes that she had hoped to see to the recommendations that we had finished going through. Upon reading through her email several more times, I determined that it's possible to distill that request down to just a couple of small changes to the recommendations. And so if others are okay with revisiting, I have some reservations about revisiting the recommendations, but if others are okay with that, we could take a quick look and see if we can make these small changes to the recommendations.
So you're asking if there's any objection to that process?
I think so, yeah.
Okay. I'm not seeing any.
Okay, so is there a second? We had a second, yes, okay.
Yep.
Yeah, okay, so I'm gonna share my screen and go to the recommendations. Okay. And so the recommendations that Nancy made, and obviously Nancy can chime in, I wasn't expecting her to be here, so I did this on her behalf, involve the natural resources chapter and specifically just two items. So the first is, just toggle back here. The first one is natural resources goal number 2, which is increase urban tree canopy and expand urban green space. And under that, the proposal is to add a third strategy, which is as follows: where possible, plant and maintain land around municipal buildings with native plants to support biodiversity. And then you can see there's two action items. The first is when adding new planting areas or replanting existing areas, use native plants to the extent possible and remove any invasive plant species. And then the second action item would be to provide training for staff with the skills needed to maintain native plant species on municipal land. Any comments, concerns?
I'm just trying to, I'm looking at the 2.2 strategy and seeing how that, seeing how that compares, or if that's the one just above it.
Yeah.
If it's, it seems like a very specific iteration, because that certainly also emphasizes native trees. And the one above talks about coordinate tree planting efforts. You're scrolling, so I can't see it anymore.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
I thought you meant
I'm
the
looking
one
at-
above that one.
No, I'm sorry. I'm looking at the one above the new recommendation. If you could
Okay.
have 2.2 and 2, there you go. Thank you. So coordinate tree planting efforts by the city in ways that are strategic and sustainable, planting primarily native trees. I don't see why 2.3 isn't kind of incorporated in 2.2. It seems like if it's coordinated by the city, an emphasis on native trees, that would apply to municipal buildings.
Well, I think that if I might share, I think that the thing about the 2.2 talks about tree planting, which does occur throughout the city. So on tree belts and parks. And I think that this other item is specific to, municipal buildings and properties around those buildings.
Yep. No,
We're not suggesting necessarily, although I'm sure some people would love to plant all of our tree belt with pollinator gardens, but this is specific to municipal buildings.
I'm just offering that it seems like it's already essentially covered in 2.2, but I've made my point. I'll stop there and hear from others. And if people could just speak up, because I can't see most people with the screen share.
This is Hannah. I just wanted to say, I think the main difference is that 2.2 is specific to trees and 2.3 expands to plants. So I think having them separate is fine. And we could also synthesize and have 2.2 be more general, but I think this is helpful.
Thank you. Anybody else? Again, I can't see everybody, so just speak up. Or I guess, is there any other objection or concern about adding that? Okay. Should we go on to the other one?
Yes.
Mary?
Give me just a moment while I scroll down to it.
Sure.
The other one simply asks that we add a phrase about essentially preserving 100, as Nancy said, 100% of the farmland that we currently have, or no net loss, however you want to say it. But I've simply added this phrase at the end of 6.1 that talks about conservation of farmland. So continue to work with landowners to conserve prime farmland and working farms, aiming to prevent any loss of farmland in Greenfield.
Thank you. Any comment from the committee on that recommended addition? Just making the hope of retaining 100% explicit.
Say that again, George?
I said it's making the hope to retain 100% of the existing farmland
Right.
explicit.
Yep.
Any thoughts on that? Does it look great to people, or any hesitation about it? People are struck silent because it's a great idea.
This is Hannah again. I don't know. I feel a little torn about saying that the hope is to prevent any loss of farmland in perpetuity. I know this isn't like a binding document, but I just think we have a lot more complicated stuff coming down the pike, but a statement around maintaining as little loss as possible. I don't know. It feels very like hopeful, but not necessarily realistic, I guess. I also like farmland, but I don't know. The housing conversations feel so intense, and I don't want to put anything out there that seems unrealistic. I'd rather put something out there that is sort of aligned with what we really hope it is, which is as little touching of farmland as possible.
Yeah, I think I would, when I see that, I think, okay, if any farmland is lost, this has failed. And I would hesitate to put that high a bar. I think the spirit is already there to preserve. So I would be, yeah, I think that's unnecessary and perhaps a little, like I say, sets up for, some success at preservation being seen as a failure because some wasn't preserved. So I would, my inclination would be not to include that. Anyone else want to weigh in?
Maybe if we were to remove the red and say something like continue to work with landowners to maximize conservation of prime farmland, or like some other emphasis of how we want to do as much as possible. Because without the red, it does just say work with them to conserve. But so we could add a little more oomph to it.
So maximize conservation.
Yeah, something like that.
I'm more comfortable with that. I'll just respond.
Same here.
That would be just adding one word and changing from conserve to conservation. Oh, you're working on it. Okay. Is there anyone who is not comfortable with that adjustment? I'm sensing assent to that change. Seeing no one else wishing to speak that I can tell. Okay. So those are the only two last minute adjustments, Mary? Okay. And so your motion essentially is to send forward the recommendations, including the ones we just made. The adjustments we just made. Okay. Got it. Okay. Thank you, Mary. And so now discussion on the motion to forward this to the planning board. Is there any? Before we take a vote. Hearing or seeing none. All in favor of the motion of sending this forward?
Aye.
Hi.
If you could, Mary, if you could take the sharing down, it would help to everybody. I think that was unanimous, but I'm not sure. I'll ask again. All in favor of sending this forward? And I think
Aye.
Mike said aye. Yep, it
Aye.
looks like that's unanimous. Excellent. That's the first step on that agenda item.
This is Nancy. I just want to thank you all for considering those last minute edits. And Mary, thank you for wordsmithing it. Thank you.
And thank you, Mary, Nancy, for your persistence. So the next portion of this agenda item is process for any changes to the master plan in the future.
George, before we move on, would you be able to just tell us what your process is with the planning board now, once I send this off to the planning board? What you anticipate that might look like?
Yeah, we don't do this very often, so
Okay.
Obviously, and I was not on the planning board when it happened last time.
Okay.
But I believe the planning board would essentially in its simplest form, the planning board could vote to accept this as an addition to the master plan.
Mhm.
What happened last time is that there were, an attempt to get a lot of buy-in by having some public forums, and this is obviously before the SGIC existed, and having public forums and having it, I think, endorsed by the council and the mayor. Again, the only formal vote is of the planning board.
Yes.
But there were some well-attended public forums regarding it as well. Just again, to not essential to the process, but to try to, do the kind of things this committee has been doing to try to engage the public around it. Does that help? Is that clear enough? And I see Jonah's hands.
I think it's just worth noting, and maybe when it's shared, it's worth noting that there were two public engagement meetings as a part of creation of this, which is different than sharing the final product. But I think there has been public input, which is important to note.
And if I can add to that, Jonah, thank you. There was, as we moved toward approval of the initial master plan, there was, as Nancy can attest, there was a lot of public input preliminary to that as well. And then there was some subsequent to the approval. So just to give that context.
Great. I'll make sure I include that in the letter that I send off to the planning board. Thank you.
Sure. Is there anything more on this? Because this is process for any changes to the master plan in the future. This was the portion of this agenda item.
Yeah, I put that on there just because Nancy had sent in these changes and I wasn't sure if we would want to entertain them as part of this thing we just did, or if they would have to be separate moving forward. But it seems like we've been able to accept those in.
I thought you were talking about in the future.
Well, I
Okay.
kind of am, but perhaps that can be folded into the story map part of the discussion a little bit later on, unless anyone else has anything that they want to say about making changes to the recommendations moving forward. No.
I'll just say, I mean, we had a distinct opportunity with the Conway School to do
Yes.
this. And I think being alert to other possibilities for refreshing or updating portions of the master plan would be wise.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if that would be through maybe UMass. I think we've, doing the land use and the natural resources chapter sort of exhausted the Conway Schools area of focus. So then any other chapters would have to probably, if we could get, a nice, honestly, we got a nice deal with the Conway School doing these couple of chapters in terms of the cost and the amount of time they spent on the project. And I don't know if there's something similar, through UMass or other area colleges that might be a good fit. So.
The other thing I wonder about is we have a lot of collaboration. It's based on certain contracts for consultation with FERCog. And I don't know if they, might for a chapter or something like that. That might be something to consider.
Yep. So every year the city gets to ask for local technical assistance. So every year the FERCog gets a chunk of change to provide technical assistance to all of its towns. And that's one way that they could perhaps do a chapter, probably not more than that, but that could possibly fit within that funding. So something
I'll just offer for EJ and other members of the public who may be listening to this recording, who aren't familiar, FERCog is the Franklin Regional Council of Governments, which when the county system was abandoned in the state, they basically, for rural areas, council of governments replaced them as far as having a regional support function. We say it so often, we assume everybody knows what it is.
Great. Great.
And then, so we're moving on. Oh, yes, Nancy.
I have a question. So Mary, are you asking or suggesting that this group might want to update one more chapter in the master plan, and that we might seek funding to be able to do that?
Absolutely. I mean, now that we've got 2 updated chapters, it would be great to have the other ones updated in close proximity. Because right now we have this sort of situation where we have the 2014 plan, we've got this new update that we're going to still have to figure out sort of how it resides alongside the old plan. And wouldn't it be nice if all the chapters could be updated and somehow put together as the new master plan?
Do you have a thought of what chapter is in greatest need of updating?
I feel like others probably have a better idea than I do of that, like you, Nancy, or others who have been involved longer in the process.
Well, I think you've raised an interesting question, which I hadn't really thought about. I'd like to put it on the agenda for some future meeting to have that discussion when we have all sort of thought about it.
And I'll jump in that I don't have off the top of my head, an idea of which chapter would beg the most for updating, but I think our next agenda item, the focus for 2025 could speak to that.
Yeah,
this
definitely.
committee could take some of the workload of trying to brainstorm about that and, offer that to the planning board. Both about prioritization and possible resources. Okay, the next is okay. Next portion of this is about the story map.
Yeah, so I agreed to put together a mock-up of the portions of both of the chapters, recommendations, just so folks could see what it looked like. I don't know who's had a chance to see it and who hasn't. I know a couple people replied. I'm going to share my screen again. Give you take a look. So for anyone who doesn't know, StoryMap is an ArcGIS product, an online product. In its simplest form, it can be free. A person can just make an account and go online and put together fairly easily, a visual presentation of, as the name would imply, it often includes maps, but it doesn't have to include maps. It can include, photos and text and things like that. So this is just something I made on my own personal account, but it could be transferred to somebody else if you all are interested in having a product. So I'm going to just page down a little bit to show you what it looks like. I've provided a little bit of background, which came from the 2014 plan and then the Conway School update. It's a very brief synopsis of what the plan is about and just a couple quick mentions of how the Conway School was involved. And then it talks about which chapters were updated. And then this is essentially jumping into the recommendations here. So I include the vision for the land use chapter, and then each goal has an associated photo, which could be replaced. I just used photos that I had of my own. And then you can see underneath are the strategies and then the action items. And so here's another example. And essentially, I did try to use the table form of the implementation table that we were just looking at, but story map did not like that. The layout was terrible. So I went with this layout. So that's just a couple of the recommendations. I'm just quickly going down to the next section. I guess I did more than I realized. So here's land use. Sorry, I popped into land use here. So this is essentially a way that we could share the information with the public. It would be easy for them to, page through and find things that they're interested in. In some cases, there's links, references. And so that's about as far as I got, I think. I didn't want to go any further unless I knew that there was interest in, using this format. And then if there is, we would need to figure out who would be the keeper moving forward, since I won't be on Sustainable Greenfield.
Okay, thank you, Mary. Any reactions people have to this? Yes.
Yeah, this
Francois.
is Francoise. I really like this. I think it's attractive and makes it easy to read and see, everything that the group has come up with. Having said that, I don't know how to do this, so I'm not volunteering to continue it. I'm hoping somebody is.
Well, I'm volunteering to create the whole story map because it wouldn't take that long to finish,
Okay.
populating all those goals and recommendations into a story map.
I'll call myself that I think it's great. I think Story Maps was wise to reject the table because it's so unaesthetic and
Yeah.
it has a purpose to have information framed that way, but it's not user friendly or readily accessible, and this is. So I think it's great to have this as one means of disseminating and making available information about this and capturing people's interest and imagination. So then, like you say, the question would be the nuts and bolts of, thank you very much, Mary, for initiating this and being willing to, add more to it. And the question would be, as it mentions in the notes, where to put this and how to maintain it and stuff like that. I do want to do, in service to the committee, do a time check. We're about 5 minutes over for this agenda item. I know how important it is, but I just wanted to point that out.
Nancy's got her.
Any other? Oh, good. Oh, please.
I just would totally agree with both of you. And for me, I'm a visual person. I love the photographs. I love the possibility of, I don't know what this would look like exactly if we could find them, but if there was a possibility of finding some photographs that might sort of convey what we're talking about in a positive way rather than just what we have. Just off the top of my head. So anyway, I love it.
All right, enthusiastic support of this going forward. Is there anything more from this that was also the, further public engagement question? I don't know, like a meeting. I know we touched on this generally. Please, Nancy.
Yeah, I feel strongly that we need to do that. And why don't we put that again to next week's agenda, next month's agenda, because we've run out of time.
Okay. Mary, was there anything else as the lead on this agenda item you want to bring up, or?
I think Carol said that the story map could reside either on, there's a Sustainable Greenfield page that, I don't know if it's really being updated, but it could also just reside on the Sustainable Greenfield's homepage under, committee, boards and committees on the website. It's simply a link, so it's not going to really take up space. And in terms of maintaining it, I mean, only if somebody discovered a, highly embarrassing typo or something like that, it wouldn't need to be, nothing would really need to be done with it once it's out there. And it's not rocket, as Bill and I would say, it's not rocket surgery. So it would, it's just knowing how to type and things like that. So, but I would need to get a firm, I don't want to do this just because I like doing stuff like this. I want to know that it's actually going to go somewhere. So maybe that can be discussed at the next full meeting and you can let me know.
Okay, very good. Okay, without objection, we'll move on to the next agenda item, which is sustainable SDIC focus for 2025. It was a suggestion of reviewing the charter for the purpose and goals and discussion of our focus for the coming year.
George, do you have like a mic on a stand or something? There's just a lot of noise around your microphone. I don't want to shut you off. I just wanted to make you aware.
Yep, no, thank you very much. I'll mute for the moment.
So I feel
So
like
I'll just ask, Mary, were you going to share the charter to prompt us discussion?
what do folks think? I mean, this is really 2025, so it's really up to you all to say how you would like this conversation to go.
Well, I'll just say, I think reviewing the charter, refreshing our, what our mandate is always a good thing to do on an annual basis.
Mm-hmm.
And we could do that today, or we could do that next month. Did you have that handy, Mary? Was that your idea from this agenda?
It was just it was a suggestion. Sadly, I did not remember that I suggested that, so I don't have it, but I could find it.
You didn't realize what a good suggestion it was.
Here it is. Do you want me to share this?
Anyone disagree? It seems like that would be helpful to review. I'm seeing some nods. Sure.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay, so this is just the purpose part of the Sustainable Greenfield Implementation Committee in the city's charter.
Should we read silently, or does anyone feel like reading this or reading parts of it?
If someone could read it aloud, it'd be great. It's so tiny on my screen, I can hardly see it.
The Sustainable Greenfield Implementation Committee shall be the entity responsible for coordinating the implementation of Sustainable Greenfield, the town's master plan. Additionally, the committee's purpose is to assist the town in meeting its green community obligations and 2050 goals by identifying, recommending, and implementing programs that foster a vital, sustainable, and resilient community by addressing the oil depletion and climate change crisis and the three interlocking aspects of sustainability: the economy, the environment, and society. And then it goes on to list a bunch of purposes. So to achieve its purpose, the community will work toward, and it's a list of several things: community self-sufficiency, economic vitality and resilience with living wage jobs, quality, energy efficient housing for diverse people and needs, energy reduction and development of clean energy sources, responsible use of natural resources such as land and water, food security, sustainable transportation options, zero waste, excellent quality of life for all, ecosystem health, and other matters as the mayor or town council or the Sustainable Greenfield Implementation Committee deems necessary.
Well, that's all. Oh, okay.
Yeah, that sounds easy enough.
Thank you so much, Mary. It's nice to have it come to life by hearing it read. Any comments or reflections for anyone? Seeing this again.
So this is Hannah. It is really helpful to hear it read and to think about it. And I think in light of sort of beginning a process of updating chapters of the master plan, which I think is really helpful, it feels like there's also an opportunity to kind of update and check in with where we are. And we've gone about that in a couple different ways in recent years when we were having guest speakers more, going back through our priorities, going through this chapter update process. And so I wonder if in 2025, in lieu of kind of doing a whole new master plan, which I know as I have certainly said before, I think is not super necessary, though I love that we're updating chapters. I wonder if we do want to do a sort of check-in, because not only looking at where we are, certainly what we've accomplished, which I know that Nancy and others have been really diligent about keeping track of what we've accomplished from the plan. It's a very different world than it was. And it makes me wonder what is not in the master plan at all, or if there's anything that feels like a top priority that in 2014 did not feel like a top priority relatedly. So if, I don't know, starting a conversation about looking at 2025 as an update year, even if we're not updating updating the whole thing, kind of updating the overarching, I don't know, something. I feel like I want to wrap my head around like where we are, especially like, for instance, I use the economic development chapter a lot, but Greenfield is in a very different place from an economic development perspective. And I think the drivers of economic development have changed a lot in the last decade. And so there are some things that I would add to that chapter, though I wouldn't necessarily throw the whole baby out. So that's just one example, because that chapter is kind of in my day-to-day. I don't know if that made any sense.
Yes, and it made a lot of sense. Thank you. Anyone else? Reflections on this? Yes, Francois.
Yeah, reading this, there's one thing that jumps at me, and that's the word implementing. Implementing programs, right? Is that what I'm seeing? And I still feel new here, and I'm wondering, do we actually implement anything? Can we? I mean, can we pick projects and work on them ourselves?
I'll just say that's been part of the discussion since this committee started a decade ago. And if Mary, could you just move up a little bit on that screen, to the purpose, because I did see the first thing it says is coordinating, and I think of that as more our primary function rather than implementing anything in particular. It's more about the focus is more about coordinating and so that's and facilitating things rather than directly implementing. There's also talks as just before implementing, it says identifying or recommending. So I think just the way that this has become so integrated into budgeting for departments every year, to reference the master plan. I think it's been indicative of how it has been utilized that way. And I think this committee has tried to foster that awareness and that prioritization. So that's my experience, is the implementation of things is not a primary focus. Yes, Mary.
I had two thoughts. One was in response to what Hannah said around economic development. And when we were touching on this a little bit earlier on possibly updating other chapters, I was thinking, right now we have Amy and we have Hannah as two really vital resources on this committee. And we also, with the Franklin Regional Council of Governments, we have a planning director who was also, the economic development person for the FERCOG. So I would be, I'm not going to be a member anymore, but I would support that idea, especially given what Hannah said about there being things that are no longer relevant or things that need to be updated. That's just an observation. My other observation is it feels like this committee has had an identity crisis since I've been on the committee. We're always asking ourselves what we're doing. And in some ways, not to be disagreeable with George, but to say I believe that perhaps the committee, if it did find an item or a project that it could really put itself behind, it might help with that feeling of, oh, what are we doing? It doesn't feel like we have a real focus. So I think if I were staying on, that would be something I would be looking for. Is there a particular project or initiative that we could be helpful with, either in supporting or even leading moving forward?
Thanks. I'll just say I'm a big fan of disagreeing without being disagreeable. I think I see Jonah's hand, but I think Nancy's was up before that. I'm scrolling around here, but right, Nancy, did you?
Yeah, this doesn't, I like your thoughts, Mary Ann, but what I was going to say was back to this thing about implementation. I think the committee's mission really is to ensure that the Sustainable Greenfield Master Plan is implemented. So that's too passive, but that's what I think we do or have done.
Thank you. Jonah.
Yeah, well, I do think it's important to distinguish between what we have done and what we can do, in that this document does map out what theoretically we can do. So it does give us an opportunity to expand on what we have done. But I just say in my time here as being one of the more vocal, what are we doing here, members? I do think our two biggest successes for me personally have been updating these chapters and the creation of the Open Space Task Force, which are two things that were taking advantage of opportunities that were present, which, George, you joked around about the scope of this being totally manageable, which obviously it's totally not manageable, right? It's a huge scope. And I think that's part of the problem as far as this group's identity. It's like, whoa, we have this incredible breadth of work that's covered in this. And that may be what we do in an opportunity like this, where we say, okay, 2025 is the year ahead. Where are the opportunities? I like Mary's idea of saying, well, Amy is currently the most engaged, but Carol is as well, out sick, but the most engaged city staff that are involved. Maybe we take advantage of that as working with the folks that are present, or where we see the opportunities or the passions. I feel like the Open Space Task Force has arisen because we have folks that are passionate about that. And likewise, we have Hannah passionate about the business development side. I feel like rolling with where the passion is and where the opportunities are make a lot of sense to me. We can actually do something.
Thanks. Any other voices want to chime in?
This is Amy. I'll just chime in to say I, of course, would love to see the economic development section of the master plan updated. We have, as a department, been keeping an eye out for funding to allow us to do an economic development strategic plan. So maybe there's a way of bringing those two things together and doing one thing as opposed to two separate things that reach the same goal. And if there's a way this committee can help make that happen, that would be great.
Thank you. Mary, I think I see you searching for something
Oh,
on the screen.
oh, am I still sharing? Lucky I'm searching for something related to what we're talking about and not like what restaurants are open tonight.
None of them.
Whew, that was a close one. I have
So
a
I-
feeling I'm not gonna find the answer, but Amy, you or Hannah could reach out to the FERCog and find out what the funding cycle is for DLTA, the Direct Local Technical Assistance. I just don't remember anymore when that comes around. So that would be, it. You know, it might fund a chapter. I just don't remember anymore. I'm gonna stop sharing too.
We should be getting a request in January to put in for our priorities
Oh,
for
good.
the coming cycle.
Good.
Okay, so we're about at time for this item. Do people feel covered it sufficiently and have
I-
thoughts for going forward?
I just wanted to say one other thing on this topic that has always been a sort of question for me since joining the committee, which has been a long time, which is how this committee and the master plan is sort of viewed externally, in particular by the mayor's office and by other department heads. I think I've always felt like the makeup of the committee was just really intelligent to have, you know, Carol and Marlo and Amy and so much buy-in, you know, planning board presence and Greenfield and now the businesses, all of that. But there are departments that we're missing, in particular the rec department, and others that I feel like we don't hear from as much. We don't really integrate with it much. The CPA, we sort of had a moment there where we were like, oh, let's get more involved with the CPA, but that didn't really happen. So when I think about implementation and I think about encouraging use of the master plan, I've always felt like it is really effective with the folks that are in the room. At least the conversation is there. But then with the departments that aren't there, we don't really have that same main line. And I don't know kind of what the mayor's office's take on it is, but when I think about sort of priorities, implementation, I feel like it would be helpful to sort of recheck in with how we could be most effective. Maybe we're the committee that does have an update from every single department over the course of the year so that we're always as connected as possible to all of these municipal entities that are the ones that are actually implementing work on the ground related to the master plan, so that we make sure that there is a touch point everywhere and not just a touch point with the ones that we're sort of lucky to have in the room because of the initial structure. So that I would love to see us in this coming year maybe increase the touch points that we have, at least with municipal departments, if not with every entity like the library or GCC or FERCog, any of these bigger players that are doing work on the ground every day. That I'm not sure if all of them use the master plan. So I'll put that out there.
Thank you. Any further thoughts? I mean, obviously, ongoing discussion will continue next month. Sure.
Well, I like that idea a lot from Hannah. I think that's a really good idea. And it seems like a way that we could really help be a meaningful part of the conversation. So I think that's great. And while we're here, just to give a shout out to Mary as we're wrapping this up, and thanks for your work on this team.
Welcome.
Very much so. Okay, speaking of something concrete, we're moving on to Jonah's update from the Open Space Task Force.
Yeah, so we have our Open Space Task Force with currently Mary and Francoise and me from this team. Mary is moving on from this team and therefore from her official role in the Open Space Task Force. So we are looking for another member from this crew to join. Just putting that out there right now. No need to discuss it at the moment, but we are going to need another representative. We also have Emily from the Conservation Commission, and then the way we've started managing this is because we have interest from other members of the public. We have a few other folks who we call them non-voting members. They're not members of SGIC, but they participate in the conversation and help move things forward, but they're not official voting members. And the first number of meetings, we've had 2 meetings in the summer. and then this fall we've been meeting. We've been really focusing in on what we're going to do. We've taken the open space plan, the open space and recreation plan, and gone through all of the action steps. There's the end of that OSRP has a 7-year action plan with a ton of steps. And we've gone through that and honed in on what were priorities for our team. And we have right now we have a few top priorities that we're focused on. The first one being a real emphasis and really what I see as my main goal for our team right now of increasing conservation land in Greenfield. It's a project that we have not actively worked on as a city in a while. It's been more as opportunities have come to us. Land has been protected for conservation, but it hasn't been pursued proactively. So we're working on creating a map of prioritization of parcels to protect, together with we have a new conservation agent in the city, Jessica. So we're going to be working with her to create a new map that helps us prioritize parcels. And then we see the role of this team towards this goal of facilitating new protection of land. So either through potentially acquisition of land by the city, which there's some funding opportunities that the mayor and Eric have said very clearly. We don't really have money for land acquisition, but there are funding sources that are available for municipalities, including the CPA, but also state funds that are not being accessed and haven't been by Greenfield. So we see working to proactively protect some land that potentially could be acquisition, also could be through partnership with land trusts and conservation restrictions put on land in the city, as being a real focus for what we can do. So mapping and then actively working to protect that land in collaboration with various entities. So that's really the big one. And then a couple of the other priorities that we've taken away from the OSRP are helping with the city trails, which I have met with Christy in the rec department and talked a bit about this. And we're just trying to figure out how we can be helpful. And then the third action from the OSRP that we want to see move forward, it's a little more challenging, is helping the city to move forward an analysis of impervious surfaces and stormwater management. So that's another thing that's in the OSRP, but is not currently moving forward. So those three goals of mapping and conserving new land, improving trails, and impervious surface analysis, those are sort of the three that we honed in on from the OSRP that we want to focus on. There are tons of good action steps in there, obviously lots that we would love to implement, but that's what we are focusing on right now. And we've broken that into some concrete next steps and that we're all starting to work on. One of which is starting to build some relationships, including our next meeting. We're hoping to have Franklin Land Trust attend and start to build our relationship with some of the regional land trusts so that when opportunities arise, we're ready to roll with them. So yeah, that's where we're at. I think we're just, the first many months we're organizing, and so now we're just starting to hit the ground and really starting to move things forward.
Thank you, gentlemen. And I'll just comment. I think that sounds fantastic, and I think this is a wonderful example, as people are talking about, what this committee can do if something doesn't have a home. I know that's an idea that Nancy came up with years ago. If and this is something that was a recommendation by an open space committee. It has happened via getting an independent committee started of that nature, and so I think this has been a wonderful creative initiative from members of this committee to create this, to move this important work forward. It's so essential to parts of the master plan. I'll just make one technical comment that I think it's important to identify this. I came across a a video about a meeting, and it said Sustainable Greenfield Implementation Committee. And then I realized, oh, it's the open space. So I would suggest when it's named, list first open space task force, then parenthetically a subcommittee of the SGIC, just so to avoid confusion. So
Yeah, guess I should, because I don't have anything to do with those. I should let GCTV know, I guess, to list them that way, right? Because we don't
Yes.
create those titles. Yeah. Yeah, great.
thanks. Anybody else? Nancy? You're muted, Nancy.
Trying to unmute myself. Okay. The question I have is, that has the committee been defined as having to, that you have to have be a member of SGIC in order to participate? And if so, why was that created?
Well, so it's a task force of SGIC, which is language that's, that's written out that says that we're allowed in SGIC to create task force. So it is to be an official member without some other creation of a new committee, standalone committee separate of SGIC, that we are supposed to. We consider, Emily is a member of the Conservation Commission, not SGIC, but since it is sort of in some ways a co-committee between the two commissions, two groups, we see it as her being an active member. So we have a few other people that, if you came to a meeting, it would seem like they were just members of the committee. That's the way we're treating it, but they are not appointed members. They are members of the public that are participating in the conversation.
Thank you, that's helpful.
Yeah, so if you know anybody, they're welcome to attend, and we welcome the folks that want to come be.
But it also sounds like, as long as it's a person who has been officially appointed to a city committee, they potentially could be, well, if the topic overlaps, could become a voting member, like Emily, for example.
Right. And we did invite someone from the Rec Commission as well, but nobody was able to.
So if somebody on the Rec Commission raised their hand, they could become a voting member.
That would be wonderful. We
Okay.
invited that, but nobody took us up on it.
Thanks for that clarity.
Any other comments? Thank you so much. Great work. So nothing else on that. We're moving on to public comment. What I think we just lost our member of the public. Who's here? Bummer. Okay. Well, we had 10 minutes set aside for that. Then we have an opportunity for announcements. So announcements related to sustainability. Any announcements? Yes, Nancy.
Well, this isn't maybe an announcement, but a report. Just, I was thrilled that recently Greenfield, as you know, and SGIC was the co-sponsor of it, an energy show. And I was thrilled to see the number of people that were interested in learning more about how they could find the money in order to decarbonize, get off of fossil fuels. And it's huge change from 8 or 10 years or even 5 years ago, when Greenfield held that kind of a meeting in the past. We were lucky to get 12 people, and they were not enthusiastic or forthcoming the way the people were at this meeting. So it was really heartening, and thank you so much, SGIC. Thank you, Amy, and your staff. They were amazing, and FERCog was amazing. Also, Allison Gage did a lion's share of the pulling together the resources. having them in one place, and GCTV was great in filming the presentation part. Just, I guess really it's the first time also that we've been able to have people, vendors in the room who actually offer services. Well, it's not the first time, second time, because we did get community action last year who could sign people up right then. But this year, it's partly the structure of Mass Save has changed. So there are a lot more players. There are a lot more people that can handle, who can sign people up and who can shepherd people through the process. I guess that's the other side of it, is feel more optimistic people can actually follow through with being, if they want to do something, it actually can happen. And that has certainly been a struggle for many years. People sign up and nothing happens, nothing happens, nothing happens. So fingers crossed, things are changing. And I'm really excited that Carol Collins is not here, but that she has applied for a grant, which would give Greenfield a person, a real live human being who would do promotion around this issue and would also answer questions and be proactive. And I'm dreaming now, but reaching the landlords, boy, that is such a challenge. That is so difficult. And since 50% of the people in this city are renters, then they're likely the people that are most struggling with paying their energy bills. We absolutely need to get those landlords to step up to the plate and to take action. So I'm hopeful that this new staff person will take the lead on doing that, and Greenfield looks forward to partnering with them and being relieved of being the lead.
Thank you very much, Nancy. I'll just riff on that for a minute, in the sense that, one thing I think is, so, because we were talking about, town departments, which are essential, but I'm also have always been struck at not just the individual volunteers, but the volunteer organizations in this town, and the wonderful collaboration between those organizations and more official ones. Greening Greenfield is one. The Greenfield Tree Committee is one. There used to be an official tree committee. When I first moved to town, that was the first thing I joined. I went before the select board, just before the changeover to the mayoral system, to get, approved to be on the town's tree committee. But since then, it's been, a volunteer organization, and it's wonderfully, effective at implementing the kind of things that are contained within the master plan. And I'll say too that people probably wouldn't have been aware of this. The initial draft of the Complete Streets ordinance was drafted by the Greenfield Bicycle Coalition, which is a volunteer group that was no longer active. It was sent through this committee, then was sent through the planning board, and then was approved by the council. So just thinking of this wonderful synergy of efforts from various just wanted to pop in my head when I heard you talking so much, and it sounds like a wonderful event. Thank you. Any other, Mary, please.
Just since we're in the riffing mode, something popped into my head when Jonah was presenting, which is that, and when Nancy, I think, mentioned Allison Gage, who is a land use planner for the Franklin Regional Council of Governments, and she attended the last Open Space Task Force meeting. And I don't know what the makeup of this committee is going to be going forward. It sounded like maybe there was a replacement already identified for me, but if not, perhaps Allison would want to serve on this committee. I mean, I think, along with what George was just saying about, the value of the, independent organizations, the nonprofits, whatever in town, also being more connected with the COG, I think, is something that Greenfield hasn't always excelled at, but I think this could be a way that, the COG could get connected to Greenfield. So just a thought.
Nice. Any other announcements or riffs?
I'll just
Go ahead.
share a couple sort of related things that the GBA is working on that feel connected to everything we're talking about. I actually think this kind of came out of Amy reconnecting with Christy and her last name from the Center for Ecotechnology, but I had a great meeting with her this past week to talk more about how we can get Greenfield businesses involved in some of their assessments and on a path towards different interventions that can save businesses a lot of money around waste management, energy management. And I was both really excited to hear how the GBA could help and really leverage what CET already does. And also to hear, she said about 30 to 40 businesses in Greenfield were already on their list for different kinds of assessments, either having gone through them already or getting ready to. And it just reminded me how many businesses in Greenfield specifically already have a lot of this work on their radar. And so the GBA can just be even more encouraging and helping businesses who don't have that work on their radar get connected with CET and community action and other organizations. And then we also are continuing, we sort of quickly formed a group this year called Blooming Greenfield that put out some flower barrels just to sort of see what the reception of it was. And while it was fun and a little disorganized, we are going through a process now of officializing that group a little bit more under the umbrella of the GBA to have Blooming Greenfield be an ongoing sort of club under the Business Association header that's focused on beautification and storefront improvement and, making first downtown and then other business areas just look a little better, feel a little better, be more inclusive. And so I'm excited, to George's point, to have a sort of little volunteer engine of our own that's looking at some of these surface things that make people feel really good about coming out and frequenting businesses. So that's something we have forming for 2025. So more to come on that, I'm sure.
Yes, Nancy.
I'm thrilled to hear that. And it reminds me that it hasn't happened yet, but I'm so excited that there's somebody looking at purchasing the old country jeweler store. That would be so huge if that became both housing and, well, it's certainly not all boarded up and have pieces of paper all over the front windows. So fingers crossed that something good happens with that.
Agree.
To briefly continue my riff, I'm thinking too, when we're talking about downtown, those metal benches, I can't remember the name of the group, but it was a volunteer group, and that those are repurposed materials that they used to make those. So,
Rejuvenators, I think, was our name.
thank you. You were part of it. Nice. Thank you. Great. Okay, so the next thing is next meeting date and topics, and discuss who will create the agenda and lead the January meeting. And we'll take one more opportunity, Mary, to thank you so much for your service on the committee and your leadership in the role of chair.
Thanks, George.
And I hope you noticed the applause that was going on silently. This one. Yes, Nancy.
So I have a question about that. So is the main agenda item in January to choose a chair?
Well, we're due for reorganization. So every
Organization, okay.
every officer role would be refreshed. That and so it'd be good for people to be thinking out if they would be interested in serving, or who they might want to nominate.
And
Or
I'd like
kind of,
to,
oh, go ahead.
I'd like to also add my thanks to yours, George, for Mary, everything that you've done and being such a fabulous chair and
Yes.
creating, moving us into actually doing something. That was great.
Thanks, Nancy. I thought you were praising George, and I just would be remiss if I didn't thank George for running the meetings. I really appreciate that. Huge, huge asset for the group, so thank you.
Thanks. And for your serving as clerk.
Oh yeah, it was all it all worked out. Although today Amy's taking notes, so thank you, Amy. for doing
Nice.
that.
So in answer to your question, Nancy, yes, that will be an agenda item. Hopefully we won't be spending an hour and a half deciding who's.
As vice chair, would you be the one filling in until new appointments?
Sure. It seems, because you have the person who's chair who won't be here the next time. Rather, typically the chair would create it for the next, and then we decide who's going to be the chair going forward. I'm willing to do that. I would appreciate, Mary, if you and I could collaborate on the nuts and bolts, because I haven't been involved with, exactly how to put one of the agendas together. But in getting access to the minutes, Amy, as soon as possible would be great, just to be able to, refresh on some of the points that were made and things people wanted to carry on with next month. So I would be willing in my role as vice chair to take that on. Yep.
Thanks.
I'm happy to take minutes next time to save arm wrestling at the start of the meeting.
Yeah, we have been
coveted role.
we had been depending upon Eric to be the clerk, but then he is no longer really in this group, so I don't know.
He was
what
doing that in
means.
the sense of the Zoom aspect, right?
Yeah, and setting up the meetings, posting the minutes, posting the agenda, that kind of stuff. And so I've been working directly with Matt, which is, Matt's fabulous. But I don't know what will happen moving forward, how this will work itself out.
Okay. That would be helpful for me to get a sense of how that's been working.
Okay.
That's something that I was referring to.
Sure.
Just thank you so much for willing to do that overtime work.
Absolutely.
All right. Any so that sounds like that's okay with everyone. Any last thoughts before we adjourn for 2024?
I can't believe we haven't run over time. We even have a few minutes. Thank you for all of you. It's been fun working with you this year. Thank you, everybody.
It's a very rich gathering. Is there a motion to adjourn?
We adjourn the meeting.
All right. All in favor?
Hi.
Aye. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Happy holidays.
Happy holiday.
Okay.